All right, everybody, today I'm making a coffee table. So if you want to see how to turn this, so actually I went ahead and got the idea to flip the hinge over. And if I flip the hinge over, I can look where I marked my holes and then go ahead and just mark them out where they need to be. If you want to take the time to drill more holes and put more screws in, that may help, although I don't think it'll make any difference. I'm just going to put one in the front, one in the back. That should be sufficient to hold it in place. So that's what I'm going to do. So I've got my springs mounted, and there's one thing I've noticed here, and that is the gap between the side here as it moves towards my body, I guess. See how the gap gets larger? And I think it's even more pronounced on this side. As I move down, you see how the gap gets wider. And that's because there's nothing on this bracket right here holding it in position the way it is over here. So I think what I'm going to do at this point is go ahead and stop what I'm doing and go to either Lowe's or Home Depot and grab another bar and a couple more screws. That way it holds this hinge in position. Because what I was going to do was measure from the side of the box to the center of this hole to find out where I needed to mount the screws to the bottom of my table. But if this hinge isn't staying straight, then I needed to work out that issue first. I was thinking I could maybe just mount the table to it and it wouldn't matter. But the problem with that is it's going to be different on each side, and then the tabletop may not sit straight when either the lid's closed or when the lid's open. So I want to put something in here to straighten this out. I want to get the same exact length bar and make sure I square up this hinge before I go any further. So I'm going to go ahead and do that, and we will continue this later. Okay, so I've gone to the hardware store and I picked up this aluminum tube. It's 3/4 inch by 3 feet. I think it was about 15 bucks. I also picked up some nuts and bolts that are the right length and everything to attach it to the hinge. And I also picked up some wood screws for attaching the top. So at this point, I'm going to go ahead and measure out the length I need this to be. Go ahead and cut that down to size, drill some holes that are a proper size for these bolts to go through, and mount it onto the hinge. So next I'm going to center this on the mounting brackets. Just mark where I need my holes to be. I'm going to go right in the center of where the brackets go. That way I can move it one side or the other to kind of center it out if I need to. So first I will drill some pilot holes. Then holes large enough for the bolts to fit through. watch out for as you're making your little secondary bracket is you can see right here I'm getting an interference right where this little piece here is contacting that, so it's not allowing the hinge to open up all the way. So I'm going to have to cut that little notch out, kind of notch it a little bit, just so that the hinge will open all the way. Because right now, you can see that's bottomed out and the hinge is not open its full length. So I'm going to have to take that back off and notch it out. So I went ahead and just cut a whole section of that off. And when I tightened this down, what I did was I took a flat bladed screwdriver and just stuck it down in there to kind of space it away from there. So the next thing I'm going to do, now that I've got it to where my hinge opens all the way, is I'm going to go ahead and push this down. Easier said than done. Be careful, it's spring loaded. So what I'm going to do is push this down. I'm going to go ahead and grab a straight edge here. This is going to be a little tricky, so I don't have to go off camera for this. But basically what I'm going to do is I'm just going to push this down until the straight edge makes contact with the surface. That way I can find out exactly where this sits, the distance from the edge to there. And then what I'm going to do is set my board on top and make sure I center it perfectly on the coffee table. And then from there, I will put a mark on the bottom of the board. Well, I guess I'll have to also I'll measure the distance from this edge to that first hole, and then this edge to that first hole. And that'll give me where I need relative to that. So then what I'll do is put this board on top, make sure everything's centered, and I'll make marks where those two edges are at. That way I can measure from those marks to where I need that hole to be. What I'm going to use here is I've got some 1-inch long number 8 wood screws. So I'll just kind of pre-drill the hole in that location. And then I'll mount the board, open the hinge, and then mark where the other holes need to be. I went ahead and got 3 of these for each side. And what I'm probably going to have to do is, since I've kind of built this with like hollow space in here, I'm probably going to have to put a couple strips of wood right here so I have something to attach the screws to. But I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself at this point, so the first thing I'm going to do is pop this down, take some measurements, put the board on, mark where the edges are, make sure it's centered and everything, take it from there. So what I've done is I've just taken a couple of clamps to hold this down. This will hold the hinge in place, and I can take my measurements to this first hole right here. So here you can see what I've done. I went ahead and marked out the edges after everything was centered. Measured 16 5/8 to my center here, and then I marked some reference lines 3/4 of an inch to either side. That way I can just take my little pieces of wood here. That's a tight fit. I'm gonna have to trim that off a little bit. It's a little too snug. Yeah, just a little. So I'm gonna have to trim these off a little bit, but you get the point. What I'm gonna do is run some wood glue down here, pop a couple little nails in it, and that's about it. I'll be ready to go ahead and mount this thing to the bracket after that. But I'll go ahead and get these on there. The next thing I'll do is measure for my reference line. I think it was 6 3/8 is my distance here. Make sure that's centered. That's where I'm gonna drill my first pilot hole for the bracket. Then I'll set it on top of the bracket, mark out the position for the rest of the holes, and mount that thing to the hinge. We'll be in business here. So I'm going to go ahead and do that and show you what I've got. So I've gone ahead and run those boards, centered it, made my mark, pre-drilled my hole, and went ahead and put that first screw in there. And what I'm going to do at this point is go ahead and lower. Kind of difficult to do one-handed. Lower the tabletop now. And before I go mark and put in place the rest of those screws and everything, I'm just going to make sure that everything still looks centered and that we're still on my marks that I made earlier. So, looks like these marks line up okay. It's a little difficult to tell with the sides though, because it's not sitting all the way down. But it actually looks like we're good. I'm going to check the other side just to make sure that one looks good. That looks pretty good. So I think I'll go ahead and mark the rest of the holes and go ahead and get this thing secured.